The morning sunlight streamed through the dining room windows, bathing everything in a warm, golden hue. Sophia's laughter filled the room as she played with her toast, crumbs scattering across her plate. Her light brown eyes sparkled with mischief, and her golden curls framed her delicate, heart-shaped face. She was perfect, too perfect, almost like a doll crafted to resemble her mother. I sipped my coffee, watching her. "Sophia," I teased, "are you sure you're my daughter? This blonde hair, these angelic features, you're like a mini version of your mother." Lila looked up from her plate, smiling serenely. "James, don't be ridiculous," she said in that calm, confident tone that always quelled my doubts, or tried to. "You know how recessive traits work. My father used to say children always inherit the best from their parents. Isn't that right, darling?" She reached across the table to tuck Sophia's curls behind her ear. Sophia beamed. "Mama says I'm her twin." I chuckled along with them, but something inside me twisted. It wasn't the first time the thought had crossed my mind. Sophia's striking resemblance to Lila's family was undeniable, down to the smallest detail. There wasn't a single feature in her that mirrored me, not my dark hair, my sharp jawline, or my deep-set eyes. The doubt was like a splinter I couldn't remove. That evening, as I sat in my study, I found myself thumbing through an old photo album. The images of Sophia stared back at me, each one a testament to her golden-haired, fair-skinned perfection. She was a vision of the Ellington legacy, a family that prided itself on its pure bloodline and impeccable lineage. Marrying Lila had felt like stepping into another world, one of opulence and power. Her father, Victor Ellington, had made it clear from the beginning what it meant to be part of their dynasty. "The Ellington name is more than just wealth," he had told me on the night I proposed to Lila. "It's a symbol of continuity. Bloodline matters, James. I trust you understand the importance of preserving that." Back then, I had laughed it off, chalking his words up to the eccentricities of the old money elite. But now, as I stared at Sophia's angelic face frozen in photographs, the weight of his words bore down on me. The sound of Lila's heels clicking against the floor broke me from my reverie. She appeared in the doorway, a glass of wine in hand, her golden hair catching the dim light. "James," she began, her voice soft but firm, "I've been thinking." "Oh. That sounds serious," I said, trying to lighten the tension I felt creeping into the room. She smiled, a practiced, graceful smile that I knew too well. "I think it's time we had another child. A boy this time." I blinked, unsure I'd heard her correctly. "Another child?" "Lila, Sophia's 5. We're finally getting some semblance of balance in our lives." "Exactly," she said, stepping closer. "She needs a sibling, James. And let's be honest, a son would be ideal. For the family." There it was, the family. Not our family, but her family. The Ellingtons. That unshakable presence that hovered over every decision we made, every milestone we celebrated. "Why the sudden urgency?" I asked, my tone sharper than I intended. Her gaze didn't falter. "It's not sudden, James. It's about legacy. About ensuring that our children, our heirs, are prepared to carry on the name. You understand that, don't you?" Her words wrapped around me like a noose. I managed a nod, but my mind was reeling. Another child. Another perfect Ellington heir. And what about me? Would this son be mine? The Ellington estate loomed before me as I drove up the long gravel driveway, the grand manor bathed in soft golden light. It was one of their traditional family dinners, a monthly ritual where everyone gathered to discuss business, alliances, and their never-ending legacy. I parked the car and turned to Lila, who sat beside me in the passenger seat, perfect as always. Her smile was polite, but there was a glint of something in her eyes, calculation, perhaps. Sophia was already inside, escorted by the nanny, leaving just the two of us. "Don't look so tense," she said, her tone soothing. "It's just dinner." "Just dinner," I repeated, forcing a thin smile. "With a side of judgment and 3 courses of expectations." She laughed lightly and stepped out of the car, the sound of her heels crisp against the stone driveway. I followed her in, my unease growing with every step. The dining hall was as grand as always, the long table set with gleaming silverware and crystal glasses. Victor Ellington sat at the head, commanding the room with his presence. Lila's brother, Adrian, was beside him, leaning back in his chair with the relaxed confidence that came from knowing he was untouchable. "James," Victor greeted me with a firm handshake. "I trust business is going well." "It is," I said, my voice steady despite the weight of his gaze. "I've been keeping busy." "As you should," he replied. "There's no room for complacency in this family."
Dinner was a formal affair, filled with conversations about mergers, land acquisitions, and politics. I ate quietly, watching Lila and Adrian out of the corner of my eye. There was an ease between them, an unspoken connection that I couldn't quite put my finger on. When dessert was served, I excused myself, claiming a need for air. The Ellington estate was vast, and I wandered through its quiet halls, letting the murmur of voices fade behind me. I wasn't looking for anything. I didn't intend to see what I saw. The voices reached me first, Lila's familiar tone, low and urgent, mixed with Adrian's smooth, confident laughter. The sound froze me in place, like a prey animal sensing danger. My curiosity warred with my instincts, but something compelled me forward. The door to one of the upstairs rooms was slightly ajar, a faint slice of golden light spilling into the hallway. I crept closer, every step weighted with hesitation. Through the narrow opening, I saw them. The sight hit me like a physical blow. Lila was on the bed, her golden hair fanned out across the pillow, her skin bare and glowing in the dim light. Adrian was above her, his body pressed against hers in a way that left nothing to the imagination. They moved together, their intimacy so raw, so undeniable, it felt like an assault on everything I thought I knew. I gripped the doorframe, my legs threatening to give out. My wife, my Lila, was moaning softly, her hands tangled in Adrian's hair as their bodies intertwined. She wasn't just complicit, she was lost in him, her every movement betraying the passion she had never shown me. "You're reckless," she whispered between breaths, her voice tinged with a laughter that made my stomach churn. Adrian's reply was smooth, teasing. "James will never know. He's too blind to see what's in front of him." My chest constricted, the words slicing through me like a blade. My fists clenched at my sides, and for a fleeting moment, I wanted to storm in, to pull him off her, to demand answers. But I couldn't move. My rage and disbelief rooted me to the spot, forcing me to bear witness. When Lila laughed again, soft and intimate, it was the sound that finally broke me. I stumbled back into the shadows, my heart pounding in my ears. My breaths came in shallow gasps as I fled down the hallway, the betrayal echoing in my mind. Outside, the cool night air burned my lungs as I leaned against the car. My hands trembled, my mind a whirlwind of rage, sorrow, and disbelief. It wasn't just an affair. It was a deliberate act of deception, a conspiracy that had been unfolding under my nose. Sophia wasn't mine. She was Adrian's. And now Lila wanted a son, another Ellington heir, another lie to cement their twisted legacy. I gripped the steering wheel as I drove away, my knuckles white against the leather. The weight of the truth bore down on me, but amidst the despair, one thought stood clear: I wouldn't let them destroy me. I spent the next few days in a haze, my mind replaying the scene over and over. Lila's laugh, Adrian's touch, the intimacy they shared, it had burned itself into my memory. Sleep was impossible. I couldn't look at Sophia without feeling the heavy weight of betrayal pressing down on me. My first step was undeniable: I needed to know the truth about Sophia. Deep down, I already knew, but the doubt demanded certainty. I took a strand of Sophia's golden hair from her hairbrush one morning while Lila was distracted, her perfect facade as calm and radiant as ever. Sending it off for a paternity test felt like the final nail in the coffin, but I knew I couldn't move forward without answers. Days passed, each one an excruciating eternity. The results came back in a simple envelope, sterile and unassuming. My hands trembled as I opened it, the words glaring at me like a wound. Probability of paternity, 0%. The paper fell from my hands. It was true. Sophia wasn't mine. She had never been mine. Every moment I'd spent as her father, every story I'd read her, every hug, every tear, it had all been built on a lie. That evening, I confronted Lila. She was sitting in the living room, sipping wine with the elegance of someone who had nothing to hide. "Lila," I said, my voice colder than I intended. "I got a test done." She looked up, her expression calm, her golden hair catching the soft light. "A test?" "A paternity test," I clarified, watching for any flicker of guilt or surprise. There was none. She set her glass down with deliberate care. "I see. Do you have anything to say?" I pressed, my anger bubbling beneath the surface. Lila sighed, leaning back in her chair with the composure of someone preparing for a negotiation. "James, I won't insult your intelligence by denying it. Sophia isn't biologically yours." Her calm admission stunned me. She wasn't even trying to deny it. "How long?" I asked, my voice raw. "How long have you been lying to me?" She met my gaze with unwavering confidence. "Since the beginning. It wasn't personal, James. It was about the family." "The family?" I barked, the word like acid on my tongue. "Your family. The Ellingtons and their obsession with bloodlines. That's what this is about?" Lila tilted her head slightly, as if I was a child who didn't understand. "You married into this dynasty. You knew what it meant. The Ellington name carries expectations, purity, continuity, legacy. Sophia is part of that legacy." "Adrian," I said, spitting the name like a curse. "He's her father, isn't he?" She didn't flinch. "Yes." The simplicity of her response only fueled my fury. "You disgust me," I snarled, rising to my feet. "Do you even care what this has done to me? To Sophia? Or am I just some pawn in your twisted family game?" Lila stood, her calm demeanor unshaken. "You're being dramatic, James. You're still her father in every way that matters. And as for the family, I've only done what was necessary." "Necessary?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You've betrayed me, humiliated me, and used me. Don't talk to me about necessity." Her expression hardened. "You think you can walk away from this? From us? Be careful, James. The Ellingtons don't take kindly to disloyalty." I left before my anger consumed me, slamming the door behind me. Her warning echoed in my mind, but it didn't matter. She had made one thing clear: the Ellingtons weren't just a family. They were a machine, and I had no intention of being a cog in it any longer. But if they thought I would go quietly, they didn't know me at all.
The Ellington estate had always felt imposing, but now it was suffocating. Their wealth and power, once a distant backdrop to my life, had become a weapon they wielded against me. I had to tread carefully. I had to strike back. I spent the days after my confrontation with Lila in silence, pretending to be the defeated husband. I played my role well, coming home late, avoiding eye contact, making just enough conversation to keep suspicion at bay. Lila's calm indifference told me she believed I had accepted my place in their twisted game. That was her mistake. I began gathering information, starting with the business. The Ellington empire was vast, a labyrinth of real estate, investments, and shadowy ventures. I had dabbled in their operations during our marriage, enough to know where to look for cracks. At night, when Lila and Sophia were asleep, I pored over financial records, emails, and legal documents I had collected over the years. The family's obsession with secrecy had worked against them. They never anticipated that someone within their ranks might turn on them. What I found was worse than I'd expected. Offshore accounts, suspicious cash flows, and investments tied to shell companies. The Ellington name was spotless on the surface, but beneath it was a web of deceit and corruption. And Adrian was at the center of it. I couldn't do this alone. I needed help, someone who hated the Ellingtons as much as I did. That's when I reached out to Malcolm Pierce, a rival businessman who had spent years fighting their stranglehold on the market. He was ruthless, cunning, and exactly the kind of ally I needed. Malcolm didn't ask why I was turning on my wife's family. He didn't care. All he saw was an opportunity to weaken the Ellingtons, and I was his inside man. Playing the long game was excruciating. Every dinner with Lila, every interaction with Adrian, every moment I had to pretend like nothing had changed, felt like poison. But I endured it. I needed them to believe I was broken, that I was harmless. Lila began pushing the idea of having another child. She brought it up casually at first, then more insistently, always with the same polished smile. "We should think about it seriously," she said one evening as we sat in the living room. "A son would mean so much to the family." The word family grated against my nerves, but I nodded. "Maybe," I said, feigning hesitation. "But we need to make sure Sophia feels secure first. She's still so young." Lila tilted her head, studying me like I was a puzzle. "You're a good father, James. Sophia adores you." The irony nearly choked me. When the time was right, I struck. I arranged for a private meeting at one of Malcolm's properties, a sleek office hidden behind layers of security. Together, we finalized the plan to expose the Ellingtons. The evidence I provided was damning: Adrian's financial misconduct, illegal dealings tied to the family's investments, and even their influence peddling in local politics. Malcolm assured me he had the contacts to make sure it all went public in the most devastating way possible. "This will ruin them," he said, a cold smile on his face. "That's the idea," I replied, my voice steady. But it wasn't just about ruining them. It was about taking back my life, my dignity, and making sure they could never manipulate anyone else the way they had manipulated me. As I left the office that night, I felt a sense of clarity I hadn't had in weeks. The Ellingtons had built their empire on lies, but now the truth was coming for them. And I would make sure they felt every moment of their fall. The night of the gala was as grand as everything the Ellingtons touched. Their estate sparkled under the soft glow of chandeliers, the air buzzing with the chatter of the wealthy and powerful. It was a night to celebrate their latest triumph, a record-breaking acquisition that would solidify their dominance in the real estate world. Lila was radiant as ever, draped in an emerald gown that clung to her every curve. She moved through the crowd with effortless grace, a queen among her subjects. Adrian stood nearby, charming guests with his easy confidence. They looked untouchable, as if nothing could pierce the golden facade they had so carefully constructed. But they didn't know what was coming. I arrived late, deliberately understated in a dark suit that made me blend into the crowd. Lila spotted me as soon as I entered, her smile faint but calculated. "You made it," she said, kissing my cheek. "I wasn't sure you'd come." "I wouldn't miss it," I replied, my voice calm. "A night like this deserves to be remembered." She didn't catch the edge in my tone, too busy scanning the room for someone more important to greet. I stayed on the periphery, watching, waiting. Everything was in place. Malcolm's team had worked flawlessly, ensuring that tonight's events would unfold with precision. At the stroke of 9, it began. The first sign was subtle, a ripple of whispers spreading through the crowd as phones buzzed with notifications. I saw guests glancing down at their screens, their expressions shifting from confusion to shock. "What's going on?" Lila asked, frowning as she noticed the growing unease. I didn't answer. Instead, I moved closer to the center of the room, where Victor was preparing to give his speech. Adrian stepped forward, his usual confidence faltering as he glanced at his phone. His face paled as he read the headlines that were already going viral. Ellington Empire tied to corruption scandal, leaked documents reveal financial crimes and cover UPS. The evidence was everywhere: screenshots of Adrian's transactions, emails linking Victor to illegal deals, and records of their offshore accounts. The media had picked up the story within minutes, and the fallout was instantaneous. The room erupted into chaos. Guests whispered furiously among themselves, some already making their excuses to leave. The Ellington name, once synonymous with power and prestige, was now tarnished in real time. Lila turned to me, her eyes wide with confusion and fear. "James, what's happening?" I met her gaze, my expression cold. "The truth, Lila. Something your family has been running from for far too long." "You did this," she hissed, her voice low but venomous. I didn't deny it. Adrian tried to regain control, stepping onto the stage to address the crowd, but his usual charm failed him. His voice cracked as he stammered out a denial, but it was too late. The evidence was irrefutable, and everyone in the room knew it. Victor sat silently, his face a mask of rage and humiliation. For the first time, the patriarch of the Ellingtons looked powerless. As the chaos unfolded, I stepped outside, the cool night air a welcome relief from the suffocating tension inside. I lit a cigarette, a habit I'd abandoned years ago, but tonight it felt appropriate. Lila followed me, her composure shattered. "You don't understand what you've done," she said, her voice trembling. "I understand perfectly," I replied, exhaling smoke. "Your family thought they were untouchable. You thought you could manipulate me, use me. But now the world knows the truth." She stepped closer, her desperation turning to anger. "You think this makes you a hero? You've destroyed Sophia's future, her legacy." "Sophia's legacy?" I snapped, my voice rising. "Sophia doesn't need your family's lies. She needs a chance to grow up without this toxic empire dictating her life." Lila's eyes filled with tears, but I felt no sympathy. She had chosen this path, and now she had to walk it alone. I left her there, standing in the cold, as the Ellington empire crumbled around her. The drive home was quiet, the weight of the night settling over me. I had done what I set out to do. The Ellingtons were finished, their reputation in ruins. But the victory felt hollow. Sophia's laughter echoed in my mind, a painful reminder of what I had lost. She was innocent in all of this, a child caught in the crossfire of her family's deceit. I didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain, I wouldn't let the Ellington name define her life. The battle was over, but the war was just beginning. The Ellington estate stood quiet now, stripped of its usual grandeur. The scandal had spread like wildfire, dragging the family's name through the mud. Their empire was in ruins, their influence reduced to whispers of what it once was. I hadn't been back to the estate since that night, but today was different. Today, I was here to say goodbye. Lila stood on the front steps, waiting for me. She looked different, thinner, paler, as if the weight of the last few weeks had drained her vitality. The composed elegance she once carried was gone, replaced by something raw and human. "You came," she said, her voice soft, almost unsure. I nodded, my gaze steady. "I came for Sophia." She hesitated, then stepped aside, letting me into the house. The silence inside was oppressive, the air thick with the echoes of a family brought to its knees. Sophia ran to me as soon as she saw me, her golden curls bouncing with each step. "Daddy," she cried, throwing her arms around my waist. For a moment, the bitterness melted away, replaced by the warmth of her embrace. She didn't know the truth, and she didn't need to. To her, I was still her father, the man who told her bedtime stories and made her pancakes on Sunday mornings. "Hey, sweetheart," I said, lifting her into my arms. "Ready to go?" She nodded enthusiastically, oblivious to the tension between her mother and me. Lila and I stood in the doorway as Sophia played with her suitcase, her innocent chatter filling the silence. "You're really taking her," Lila said, her voice breaking. "She needs stability," I replied. "A chance to grow up without all of this hanging over her head. You know that. She's all I have left, she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. Everything else is gone. Adrian fled the country. My father's in hiding. The Ellington name means nothing now. Her vulnerability caught me off guard, but I didn't let it sway me. That's because of the choices you made, Lila. You built your life on lies, and now you're paying the price. She wiped her tears, her composure slipping back into place. And what about you, James? What do you have left? I glanced at Sophia, who was now trying to zip her suitcase with determined little hands. I have her. And that's enough. Lila looked away, her shoulders sagging as if the weight of her actions had finally caught up with her. As we drove away from the estate, Sophia chattered about her favorite toys and the new room I'd promised her at my apartment. Her innocence was a fragile light in the darkness, one I was determined to protect. But as the Ellington estate disappeared in the rearview mirror, I couldn't help but feel the emptiness that lingered. I had one, but at a cost I hadn't fully anticipated. My marriage was over, my life upended, and Sophia would grow up with questions I couldn't fully answer. The world might see me as the man who brought down the mighty Ellingtons, but inside, I felt like someone trying to piece together the remnants of a shattered life.
Weeks turned into months. Sophia adapted quickly, her resilience a constant source of hope. She brought life into my otherwise quiet apartment, her laughter filling the empty spaces. One evening, as I tucked her into bed, she looked up at me with those bright eyes that never failed to disarm me. "Daddy, are you happy?" she asked. I paused, caught off guard by the simplicity of her question. "I'm getting there," I said honestly. "Good," she replied, snuggling into her pillow. "Because I am." I kissed her forehead and turned off the light, her words echoing in my mind. As I sat on the balcony that night, looking out at the city lights, I realized that the war was over. The Ellingtons were gone, their power dismantled. I had done what I set out to do. But more importantly, I had Sophia. And for the first time in years, I felt something close to peace. The past was ashes now, scattered in the winds of their own making. All that mattered was what came next, a new beginning, built on truth, hope, and the promise of a better future. Subscribe to never miss a new story and discover even more captivating tales.